You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Well, another weekend is over. It's gone. It's gone forever into the annals of history. Yes, it's Monday, folks. Happy Monday. I hope you're enjoying your Monday. If you're working, even better. If you're not working and still under sequestration from the pandemic, which is growing a little weaker, I think, as we're getting more information provided to us and as states are reopening. Hopefully your job didn't go away permanently, and if it did, and you're home today, you've been home all day, you're looking for work or don't have work, I hope you find something soon. Hopefully the government will get off their butts, and if they're actually going to produce another stimulus package that is meant to help people who are hurt by the pandemic, that they strip away all the politics from it, and they get around to helping people who need it. So, how's that for a little stab of politics right away at the beginning of the show? This is Scotty Roberts, and you're listening or watching to the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network, or you can find it over on my YouTube stream. Odyssey, for just the audio version, you can hear that at odysy1.com. Come and see all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio. And you can also come over to my YouTube channel, see the visual simulcast, and join the live chat room during this program. It's going on right now over at youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Welcome to the show. It's Monday. And hopefully you had a great day. I know I did. And so we're going to kind of pick up where we left off on the 13th Amendment thing. We're going to wrap that up. There's not a lot left to it. So we've got time today to kind of frolic around a bit before we get into serious issues. But I wanted to share with you something that I was reminded of this morning. I did a lot of reading of Carl Sagan, especially when I was doing a lot of writing and research into the paranormal realm, into mythological realms, things like that I would write about, theories about, aliens or extraterrestrial contact, seeding, origins of mankind, things like that. Looking into comparative religious myths, how they corresponded with some of the what you might call alien mythos that's hit us over the last century especially. And so in looking at all that, I would look at Carl Sagan. I liked the way he thought. And there's something he wrote about called The Purple Dragon in My Garage. And I've made mention of this before, but this morning I posted this to my Facebook, and I said, are you insistent that white privilege exists, or are you contending that it doesn't exist? I tend to be one of those guys who says, I don't think white privilege exists. I think we have American privilege, where everybody who is here has an equal chance to get ahead. I think there have been pockets of systemic racism, especially in the South. And I think that those things we have worked very hard to eradicate over the years. I think looking at some of the protesting and the rioting that's going on in recent days, again targeting points of history, statuary, things like that, that's all superficial stuff. That is what is causing systemic racism. You do not eradicate your history or push it to the back where nobody can see it because it offends one group of people. You have to be aware that there are all different kinds of people, and we all experience equality in this country. We don't even have to go through that again. So when it comes to an argument like white privilege Or let's move it into the spiritual realm. If it comes to an argument of there is a God or there is not a God, there is a creator, there is a man-made deity out there. You start looking at issues like that where we come across, and people have their proofs. Usually in the religious realm, they end up being a proof that's only supported by faith, and so might put that into a different category. Look at systemic racism, look at religion, look at all the arguments that exist out there that are causing lots of frays and lots of conflict between mindsets nowadays. And I hail to what Carl Sagan wrote about in his book, The Demon-Haunted World, where he talked in one chapter, he presented this great analogy for how we all protect and defend our private points of view on certain things. Now, I've had some people respond to this post and say, well, maybe in religious or spiritual belief, but certainly not when it comes to racism. Well, when Carl Sagan wrote this, he wrote this about science, about how people in the scientific community will support one thing, or people will reject or support a different thing, and many times on the basis of having no evidence, real hardcore evidence to back it up. And what I've noticed in this country is we have gone from insisting that there is racism, which I don't deny. There are racists out there, but I believe it's an individual thing. And we've seen it progress to where, well, no, I'm not racist. Well, yes, you are, because you were born white, and there is white privilege. We've seen the argument progress to this. And so I want to talk about this fire-breathing dragon that lives in my garage, as Carl Sagan wrote. He said, suppose I seriously make such an assertion to you. There's a fire-breathing dragon in my garage. Surely you'd want to check it out. You want to see for yourself. There have been innumerable stories of dragons over the centuries, but no real evidence. What an opportunity. So show me, you say. So I lead you to my garage. You look inside and you see a ladder, empty paint cans, an old tricycle, but no dragon. Where's the dragon? You ask. Oh, she's right here, I reply, waving vaguely. I neglected to mention that she's an invisible dragon. You propose spreading flour on the floor of the garage to capture the dragon's footprints. Good idea, I say, but this dragon floats in the air. Then you will use an infrared sensor to detect the invisible fire. Good idea, I say, but the invisible fire is also heatless. You'll spray paint. You'll spray paint the dragon and make her visible. Good idea, I say, but she's an incorporeal dragon and paint won't stick to her. And so on, and so on, and so on. You see how the argument progresses. With each form to try to prove it exists, there's another form to say, well, it exists or doesn't exist based on this new twist I've given it. And so you can counter every physical test you propose with a special explanation of why it won't work, and why it's not so, or why it is or is so. And so now, what's the difference between an invisible, incorporeal, floating dragon who spits heatless fire and no dragon at all? If there's no way to disprove my contention, no conceivable experiment that would count against it, what does it mean to say that my dragon exists at all? Your inability to invalidate my hypothesis is not at all the same thing as proving it's true. So claims that can't be tested, assertions immune to disproof, are veridically worthless. And whatever value they may have in inspiring us or in exciting our sense of wonder, what I'm asking you to do comes down to believing in the absence of evidence on my say-so. And so I challenged everybody in that post to say, what is your say-so? What is the thing that falls into your say-so category? You're a racist because you're white. Well, prove that. None of my actions have ever proved that. Well, you're still racist. No, I'm not. Why would you say that? Well, it's because you're invisible and you float above the floor and you're impervious to heat sensors, things like that. The new argument keeps coming out. And, of course, the newest incarnation of this was, of course, white privilege. I'm not a racist because of white privilege. I'm not a racist at all. And white privilege in this country, I doubt it exists. I think there is the privilege of those who work hard to gain something, to get ahead in life. Because I can tell you what, if I did not work hard to get where I am, I wouldn't be here. I still fight with that. I still have to work hard against that. Is it because I'm white? Is it because I'm not another color? No. There are months we struggle to make sure the bills are paid. If you rate success or privilege by what you have in your bank account or by your status in life. I'm just a guy. I write books. I draw pictures. I've done that my entire life. Does that make me privileged because of the color of my skin? No. When you start calling out somebody by the color of their skin, you have become, in essence, racist yourself. Doesn't have anything to do with skin color. And so this is the argument I think that's put forward, and something we got to think about. There's a purple dragon in my garage. And let me prove to you that either exists or doesn't exist based on the arguments that I put forward and the new steps each along the way. There's also this idea out there, moving on from the purple dragon argument, there's this idea out there that opinion equates to fact. It does not. I encountered a good friend over the last several days that had some very horrific things to charge against our president. And you may like or may dislike the sitting president. That's your choice. And you're welcome to your choice. You're welcome to your opinion. But when you start charging him with things like treason, start charging him with racism, with xenophobia, with things like this, you need to move beyond opinion. Now you can state, I think he's a racist, and move on from it. But if you're using that to bolster your case, you better have facts and evidence in hand. And so I was challenged to debate somebody because I challenged the fact that what they said was opinion. Oh, that's your opinion. I would challenge you to show me your facts and evidence. And they said, well, let's have a debate anytime you want to debate. And I happened to be cooking for my kids at the time, and I was just reading my phone as I'm stirring the pot of spaghetti sauce. And if you're more cultured, pasta sauce. And I'm looking at my phone. I said, well, I can't really debate at the moment. I'm cooking for my kids. I said, but I'll come back and we'll do it. What do you suppose the response was? Oh, there's your diversionary. What a great diversionary tactic. Cooking for your kids. Great diversionary tactic. You obviously don't have anything to say. Now, you as my audience, do you think I had nothing to say and didn't have a point I could just roll off the top of my head? To have a debate about something? And I said, if you're insisting that feeding my children is a diversionary tactic, I said, you don't know me very well. I said, I just don't have time at the moment. I said, I'll come back to this in a little bit. And then, of course, all the detractors would all join in. Oh, so you can go look up your answers and things like that. And I'm like, no, so I can feed my kids and I'll come back to this. And so I left it for a while, and I came back. I said, there, now that I have served the final cup of chocolate milk to my youngest child while she's eating her spaghetti, I said, now I got some time. And I started countering the points with facts and evidence. And I said, the first point I would like you to do is you're charging this. It's a general charge he was making about treason against the president. And I said, that's a pretty heavy-handed charge to make, even from somebody just sitting and watching politics. I said, if you can charge the president with treason, I said, you must have more than, this is just the way I feel about the guy I don't like sitting in the Oval Office. I said, so surely you have your facts and evidence in hand. And every time I asked that, I kept getting deflected with another argument, oh, the orange turd sitting in the Oval Office, or arguments like that. And I said, you do realize that everything you're stating is opinion. I said, now, you asked for a debate. I said, if you want to debate this, I said, at first tell me at least what you're talking. I said, which incident are you talking about? Because he mentioned incidents of treason. And I said, well, which one are you talking about? Let's break them down. Let's talk about these incidents factually. I said, tell me which incident you're speaking about that's treasonous, and present your facts and evidence that he has committed treason, and then in a debate, I'll respond to that. And I said, as it is, you're speaking in generalities, and all I can do is respond in generalities. And I said, my general response would be, present your facts and evidence, and let's talk about it. Let's debate it. Well, he immediately called me a failure, and that I obviously couldn't debate the point, and so on and so forth. And I said, look, if you're going to have a debate of opinions, let's break it down this way. You say, in your opinion, Trump is a traitor to his country. I respond, Trump is not a traitor to his country. Two opinions expressed. I said, end of debate. What's there to debate? I said, if you want to debate that issue, present your facts and your evidence. And this good friend of mine, somebody I love very, not dearly, we're not close, but he's a good friend of mine. I love him. I care about him. I've known him for years. And he's somebody in the paranormal field that has written some books and things like that. And so the argument fell flat for him. He could not present facts and details and evidence. But then, along with a debate, I'm having a debate with this guy. I said, let's do it. Let's debate. Then, of course, everybody else on his social network starts coming in and throwing their 2 cents worth in, and why I'm an idiot and things like that. I said, is this a debate with 12 people, or is this a debate with you? I said, and you know how it goes. And so it really broke down to, I said, okay, here's my facts. Let me present you my facts. Why I think he's not a traitor. And I called up a couple of points where I've heard that Trump was accused of being a traitor. The whole, if you notice that the impeachment process wasn't really about him being a traitor. What was it? It was about him campaigning, affecting his campaign by trying to wipe out an opponent of his campaign with the whole Russia phone call thing. It got all watered down. Why? Because they couldn't prove a case of treason. And so we talked about that, and I presented a couple of lengthy posts about my position on this. And I said, therefore, Trump is not a traitor. Now, what's your response to that? And the response was, hey, Scotty, we've been friends for a long time. I don't want to have to remove you from because we, disagree on politics. I said, me either. I said, I thought we were having a debate. I said, I can have a friendly debate with you about facts and evidence. I said, but I love you too much to have it destroy a friendship. So that's the way that went. And so I see more and more of this. I've experienced more and more in this. And this is why I work very hard to not be name-calling or diminutive in my approach to the other person. I try to say, if you've got an opinion that you're expressing, can you please back that up with facts and evidence? Otherwise, you're just blowing air. It's just opinion. And I don't call him a dimwit or anything like that. Yet I have all these people who have these arguments about Trump, talk about how Trump is the orange turd in the Oval Office. Orange man bad. And I'll say, in all the time that I disagreed with the policies of President Obama while he was in office, you never once heard me call him, the purple eggplant in the Oval Office. You didn't hear that come from me. So the tack that I like to take and that I encourage all of you to take, if you ever get into these discussions with people, and maybe you're not a debater, you don't want to debate, you might not have all the facts in hands, but you go, look, I don't believe that. I believe this guy's a good guy or this guy's a bad guy. Be prepared, if you make a statement like that, to have to support it. And when you talk about it, don't degrade anyone else in the process. Because when you do that, I have a good friend who, I've never met him personally. We're good friends on the internet. Paranormal world, he's a good political thinker. He's a conservative. But he'll present some great conservative points of view. But then he'll tell somebody else, I saw in a post today, he responded to somebody who said, yeah, well, I'll bet you go masturbate to Rachel Maddow. Or I think he said use the term stroke one off or something like that. And I read that and I went, I said, you've just undone your argument. As soon as you start insulting people, deliberately insulting people, you lose the argument. Because that to me is opinion. And so I've been charged. I've had people tell me, well, you're always insulting people and degrading people. I said, no, I think you're projecting. I said, because I don't do that. I don't insult people. The only people I have ever insulted deliberately are people who are abusive of other people in an open thread or an open discussion. If you start getting abusive, you'll find me trying to degrade you. And I usually do it with good comic degrading. That's the way I like to do things. It's like, hey, if you're going to start calling people names, I'll start degrading you in my thread. After warning you to stop. Okay, no name calling, I tell people. It's unnecessary. Why is it necessary in public discourse, in open debate, in open discussion, to constantly insult other people for what they think? They might think they're right, and they might think they have grounds for thinking that. And something I found is that even the people who believe they have grounds for their weird opinion or dumb opinion in my book, once you start talking facts and evidence, say, well, let's discuss that. Many times I found those people going, yeah, well, okay, I see your point. I still think he's a turd. Well, okay, that's an opinion. You're welcome to your opinion. Just as John Bolton is welcome. That's what the whole thing was over the other day. And I said, John Bolton is welcome to his opinion too. Well, what about all these 4 or 5-star generals that, have backed out of the Trump administration? I said, you know what? It's their opinion. They're allowed to have their point of view. And if they disagree with the president, they can disagree all they want. And if they're going to use their disagreement and their either firing or their resignation from the administration, if they're going to use that to push their political point of view forward, well, then go ahead. More power to you. But that is your opinion. That is the way you believe. Now, they might be able to present their facts and evidence a little better than other people. Okay, you've proven your point, but there's going to be somebody else who comes along who can debate that point on the same bases. So many times we find that our political opinions, our political, even our facts and evidence are usually based primarily on our preconceived ideas and notions. And so why do those people get involved with the administration in the first place would be the question. Because they're looking for the prestige, they're looking for the position, they're looking to better their own position in their careers and in their life. If they disagree with the president, let them disagree with the president. It's their point of view. They're welcome to it. Thank you, First Amendment. So, from that point on, if you're going to make an argument, you better have your facts and evidence in hand to substantiate your argument. Otherwise, all you're doing is building a case on your personal point of view or your personal opinion. Boom, there it is. That's all there is to it. And on that note, we're at the end of the first segment. We're going to come back. We're going to wipe out this whole issue on the 13th Amendment, and we'll move on from there if there's any time left. We'll see what happens. Sit tight. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad so he can take me to Disneyland.
All right, folks, welcome back. Thanks for sitting on through the break. This is the second segment of tonight's show, the Intrepid radio program. If you missed the first segment, you can always go back and hear it in archive. You can listen over on iTunes, on Spreaker, iTunes, Spreaker. You can come over to my YouTube channel where you could still be watching this right now live in its original broadcast, simulcast. And so go over to Odyssey Radio, that's ODYSY1.com. You can find all the audio files there. You can listen live audio audibly, or come on over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Join the live chat room, which is a hell of a lot of fun. If you don't want to talk in the chat room, that's fine too. You can come and watch it as it's happening. And even if you don't want to participate, and you can see the things that are talked about. Sometimes people over there get way off topic, and that's okay. They want to talk about their sex lives, or they want to talk about the most recent usage of drugs they've had, or they want to talk about health issues or relationship issues or their pasts or things like that. Sometimes the show and things we talk about trigger those things. And you know what? They listen to the show, they put their 2 cents worth, and they also talk amongst each other while the show is playing. So if you want to do that, you can do that. Come on over. Join the Intrepid family. It's a good family of folk. And now, did I say? It's at youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. I think I said that. There it is. So also, I'll put a plug in for myself. Go to my Etsy page. That's Etsy, etsy.com/shop/son of a patriot. And if Audrey isn't there to type that in, or somebody else, I'll type it in myself over in the chat room. Come on over there to see all the t-shirts I design, the stuff I design. That's what I do for a living. I'm a designer, and it's one of the ways that we bring a little bit of extra pennies into the coffers is by putting up what I think are pretty darn good shirt designs. And so go over, take a look. The most recent is Scotty's 2 Commandments shirt, and it says in small type underneath, it says Scotty's 2 Commandments. It's number 1, treat other people the way you want to be treated. Number 2, don't be an asshole. There's my 2 commandments in life. If everybody abided by those 2 commandments, we wouldn't have any problems going on today. There wouldn't be statues ripped down. There wouldn't be fights over race wars. There wouldn't be political fighting, infighting. You know what there would be? There would be people who treat each other the way they want to be treated and who don't act like an asshole. But that's one of the shirts that's up there. So go over, take a look at all the shirts. I usually do a design for every little series we go through on the radio show, as well as other things. Go check it out. Patriotic Tees. Son of a Patriot was the original, and I think I can show that here even. For those of you who are watching audibly, or not audibly, but watching... here it is, Son of a Patriot. There's the original design that launched the whole Etsy page. And I based that very loosely on one of my ancestors, William Robards, whose grandfather, John Robards, came over from Wales in 1710 and settled in Goochland County, Virginia. And his 5 grandsons, William being one of them, fought in the American Revolution in the Continental Army. And so I loosely based this character on him. We also have Daughter of a Patriot, and there's several versions of this. You know, guys, here, look at this. guys. Son of a Patriot is a guy. He's got kind of sandy brown hair, blonde hair, and he's got a tricorn hat on his head. Guys are like, cool. Women, they're like, oh, she's a redhead. I'm not a redhead. I'm a brunette. So the original version of this was the redhead, even though I based the character on my wife. That's my wife's form and body that I use to base this. Not that you care about that so much, but so there's the brunette. That's my wife. But what about the people who say, well, I'm neither brunette nor I'm a redhead? I don't know where the blonde one is. I don't think it's even on here. So just saying, there you go. There's the two, that's the site, the Etsy site. You can see all the different things that are over there. These are all the shirts, the kinds of shirts you're going to see over there. Things like that. You got Rainy's UFO shirt. Hop in, loser, we're doing butt stuff. That was Rainy's idea, and she loves that shirt, and it just makes her giddy when she wears it. You can get the Intrepid magazine mug. That's the art for the mug. There's the mug itself. There's the other mug. There's another shot of the mug. I drink out of that almost every day on here, even though that's not what I'm drinking from now. So there you go. Longish ad, couple of minutes, 3 minutes. Go over and avail yourself of some of the garments over there. T-shirts, hoodies. You know what? It's hot right now. 2 months from now, 3 months from now, we're going to be going, oh, it's getting cold outside because fall's coming and winter's coming. Get yours now. There it is. Help support my cause. And at the same time, avail yourself of some really good garments, I think at pretty good market prices for retail. So there it is. That's all I got to say about that. Self-advertising, self-plugging. I can do that because it's my show. So I hope I had one person complain. It was in the comments of a show from way back, like almost a year ago now. But their complaint was, you got 12 minutes into the show talking about yourself before you even got to your topic on whatever it was, the Nephilim or something. And I said, that's what I do. It's my show. I said, I've got this show to help better my own circumstances. Do you think I do this show just simply out of the goodness of my heart? Well, yeah, I do. I do it anyway. I love this show. If it didn't make me a penny, I would still be doing it. There might be a time I'd have to set it aside because it doesn't help me on the bottom line, or I do it once a week instead of every day. I wouldn't do a second show with Rocky Stucci if I didn't care about the things we talk about and say. I love to share information, and I love the family of listeners that's been set up. Yeah, I love doing it, but at the same time, it's also a way for me to say I spend about half of what people would put into an average work day, 5 days a week. I spend about half of that time doing radio. Either researching for the radio show, recording the radio show, doing a live radio show, editing a radio show, making graphics, stuff like that. I spend about half of my time doing that. And I can do that because I work for myself. I don't have to punch out of a clock to do that. But it always helps when you can make that thing help the bottom line. If the show is worthwhile and people are saying it's worthwhile and they enjoy it, and I try to perpetuate it and keep it going, I do these things on the side to say, look, you can get something if you throw something in. Buy my shirt designs and stuff like that. That's why I do it. It's not like painting for the love of it. If I painted for the love of it, I'd have canvases all over here. I don't have time for that. I have so much time I spend in keeping our noses financially above the waterline, as well as producing good radio shows and things like that. So blah, 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 blah. There. Now the person who complained about me taking 12 minutes has something to complain about again. And I did say to that person, I think it was on one of the readings of my books that it came out, you spent the first 12 minutes talking about, your stuff and the things you sell and stuff like that, like artwork and the t-shirt designs and things like that. And I said, yeah, but I spent the next 129 minutes reading from my book or expounding on this topic. I said, so I spent one-tenth of the time talking about the things that I do to help this show exist. So there it is. Whew! That was laborious to get through that. I didn't mean to do that, so pardon me for doing that. But there it is. Come on over. In other words, come on over and buy a t-shirt. That's what I do. So let's move on to try to finish this whole thing about the missing 13th Amendment. And there's not much left to this. Just a couple of arguments at the end that I think we didn't have time to talk about. But remember the missing 13th Amendment. You know what it was? Just a brief recap. It means no lawyers are allowed in public office. That was the 13th Amendment in its original form. Now, there are a couple of authors who believed that, David Dodge was the main researcher, who believed that there was a covert plot that altered the U.S. Constitution, and that he has exposed it. And there was a conspiracy to subvert the American Republic, and he uncovered it. And the 13th Amendment in its original form is missing. Some of the language is missing. And by chance, Dodge and somebody else he was working with, they uncovered some of the oldest authentic copies of the United States Constitution. And it had the original 13th Amendment in it. The big question was, according to some sources in the Library of Congress, it needed to be ratified by 13 states at the time of its inception. And they only had 12. But the 13th, it was printed over and over again, stating that the 13th state did ratify it, Virginia. And yet there's no record of that. But there was also the War of 1812 that took place in the middle of this, where the Library of Congress was burned down, where the federal Capitol was burned down. So there's a lot of missing paperwork. But the implications are enormous in this, because they started uncovering all kinds of copies of the Constitution of the United States with the original amendment printed in it. Over 40 copies from 200 plus years ago have surfaced. And what was the meaning of the 13th Amendment? I'll just recap this before we go into concluding it. Remember, the missing 13th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States reads as follows. If any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor is the key word, or shall without the consent of Congress accept and retain any present pension, office, or emolument of any kind whatsoever from any empire, king, prince, or foreign power, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States and shall be incapable of holding any office of trust or profit under them or either of them. And what I then went in and talked about the historical context of the word. It's a nobility and honor. Honor was really what you received, the gifts, the special privileges that you received by working for the government. And it tied into legal action, attorneys, esquires, things like that. The Bank of England and all that, if you were given the title of Esquire. You see that on a lot of lawyers' cards today. They'll claim the title of Esquire. Not one conferred on them by another country, but this set up a historical context. And that's how you understand that the missing 13th Amendment, in its context as it was written, was really one that forbade attorneys and lawyers from holding title as attorney or lawyer in almost every case, and that they were not allowed to be able to serve in government because of the special privilege that it sets them up for. And so we went through all of this. The amendment disappeared. And if you can't recall history, we went through all the places. There were more additions found. All the arguments for it were found, pros and cons about it. The ratification process, the rationales is kind of where we left off the other day. And remember, Dodge and his co-author, they were looking to present this case again. And Senator Mitchell, who was working in the Library of Congress, wrote that Article 13 did not receive the 3/4 vote required from the states within the time limit. And his language was pretty imprecise. And he seemed to concede that although the amendment had failed to satisfy the time limit, the required 3/4 of the states did vote to ratify it. And then Dodge replied to him and said, contrary to your contention that there was a time limit that wasn't met, that was Mitchell's second argument, by the way. Well, okay, you may have proven your case that the 13 states did ratify. They ran out of time. And he said, contrary, there was no time limit amendment ratification in 1811. That didn't exist in the time that this amendment was proposed. And ratified. So any time limit is now established by Congress in the resolves for proposed amendments. And so the ratification time limits didn't start until 1917, 105 years later. So in Section 3 of the 18th Amendment stated that this article shall be inoperative unless it shall have been ratified within 7 years from the date of submission to the states by Congress. And a similar time limit is now included on other proposed amendments, but there was no specified time limit when the original 13th Amendment was proposed in 1810 or ratified in 1819, 9 years later. And Senator Mitchell remained determined to find some rationale somewhere along the way that would defeat Dodge's persistence. And although Senator Mitchell implicitly conceded that his published by error argument, he said, well, that was originally published by error in the Maine, M-A-I-N-E, the state of Maine's legislative documents and printings. When Dodge came up with 40 more documents spread all over the United States that printed the original 13th Amendment, he had to drop his published by error. Oh, that was just a mistake. And his time limit argument, he had to drop those. When he realized that those and conceded that those were invalid, he continued to grope for reasons to dispute the ratification. And regardless of whether the state of Virginia did actually ratify the proposed 13th Amendment on March 12th of 1819, this approval would not have been sufficient to amend the Constitution. And he goes into 1819, there were 21 states in the United States, and any amendment would have required the approval of 16 states to amend the Constitution. So he said, according to your own research, Virginia would have only been the 13th state to approve the proposed amendment. And Dodge replies that Article 5, the amendment procedures of the Constitution, is silent on the question of whether or not the framers meant 3/4 of the states at the time of the proposed amendment when it's submitted, or to the states for ratification, or 3/4 of the states that existed at some future point in time, because they only needed 13 states in 1810, and by 1819 they would have needed 3 more states. So that's kind of like YouTube, saying you can monetize your channel once you reach 1,000. Oh, we change it to 1,200 or something like that, or 2,000. So Dodge demonstrated that this rationale by pointing out that President Monroe had his Secretary of State, the governors of Virginia, South Carolina, Connecticut, and in January 1818, as to the status of the amendment in their respective states, the 4 new states, Louisiana, Indiana, Mississippi, and Illinois, that were added to the Union between 1810 and 1818, were not even considered. So, from a modern perspective, it seems stranger that not all the states would be included in the ratification process, but bear in mind that this perspective is based on life in a stable nation that's added only 5 new states in the last century, about 1 every 18 years. However, between 1803 and 1821, when the 13th Amendment ratification drama unfolded, they gained 8 states, almost 1 new state every 2 years. And this rapid national growth undoubtedly fostered national attitudes different from our own. Context, folks, context matters. The government had to be filled with the euphoria of a growing republic that expected to quickly add new states all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And the litmus test and the Isthmus of Panama was added. And the government would not willingly compromise or complicate that growth potential with procedural obstacles. So to involve every new state in each ongoing ratification could have inadvertently slowed the nation's growth. So And on that argument goes. And now, in 1818, the President, the House of Representatives, the Secretary of State, the 4 new states, and the 17 old states all clearly believed that the support of just 13 states was required to ratify the 13th Amendment. That being so, Virginia's vote to ratify was legally sufficient to ratify the missing amendment in 1819, and it would still be so today. But that's been buried. Why? Lawyers want to serve in public office. That's just a little jab there, but now there's some insult to injury. Apparently persuaded by Dodge's various arguments and proofs that the missing 13th Amendment had satisfied the constitutional requirements for ratification, Mr. Hartgrove of the National Archives wrote back that Virginia had nevertheless failed to satisfy the bureaucracy's procedural requirements for ratification. Now, we saw that in Trump. Everybody's making, on the left, Trump haters, making a big deal about Trump's case against DACA being voted down by the Supreme Court last week. Well, remember, Justice Roberts, in his decision, wrote, and it was a 5-4 decision. It wasn't a unanimous decision. That's why there's 9 justices for tiebreakers. But Justice Roberts, remember, he said last week, he says, we're not here to debate. The court doesn't exist to debate the veracity of the issue, to debate the intentions of the issue or the philosophy behind it. We're here to tell you that there were procedural problems, and that's why we have to deny it. So, denied on a procedural process. We see that all the time. And so, under the current legal provisions, the Archivist of the United States is empowered to certify that he has in his custody the correct number of state certificates of ratification of a proposed constitutional amendment to constitute its ratification by the United States of America as a whole. That's his job. That's what he is supposed to do. Now, in the early 19th century, that function was performed by the Secretary of State. Now, clearly, the Secretary of State never received a certificate of ratification of the Title of Nobility Amendment from the Commonwealth of Virginia, which is why that amendment failed to become the 13th Amendment to the state's Constitution. Now, this is an extraordinary admission. Mr. Hartgrove implicitly concedes that the 13th Amendment was ratified by Virginia and did satisfy the Constitution's ratification requirements. However, Hartgrove then insists that the ratification was nevertheless justly denied because the Secretary of State was not properly notified with a certificate of ratification. In other words, the government's last best argument that the 13th Amendment was not ratified boils down to this. Though the amendment satisfied constitutional requirement for ratification, it is nonetheless missing from our Constitution simply because a single official sheet of paper is missing in Washington. And Mr. Hartgrove implies that despite the fact that 3/4 of the United States and the Union voted to ratify an amendment, the will of the legislators and the people of this nation should be denied because somebody screwed up and lost a single certificate of ratification. And this certificate may be missing because either, 1, Virginia failed to file a proper notice, or the notice was lost in the mail, or the notice was lost, unrecorded, misplaced, intentionally destroyed by some bureaucrat in D.C., and this final excuse insults every American's political rights. But Mr. Hartgrove nevertheless offers a glimmer of hope. If the National Archives received a certificate of ratification of the Title of Nobility Amendment from the Commonwealth of Virginia, we would inform Congress and await further developments. In other words, the issue of whether this 13th Amendment was ratified and is or is not a legitimate amendment to the U.S. Constitution is not merely a historical curiosity. The ratification issue is still alive. But most importantly, Hartgrove implies that the only remaining argument against the 13th Amendment's ratification is a procedural error involving the absence of a certificate of ratification. And that doesn't mean it never happened. It means they can't find it. So Dodge countered Hartgrove's procedure argument by citing that some of the ratification processes recorded for other states when the 13th Amendment was being considered. He notes that according to the Journal of the House of Representatives, 11th Congress, 2nd Session, a letter, not a certificate of ratification, from the governor of Ohio announcing Ohio's ratification was submitted, not to the Secretary of State, but rather to the House of Representatives, where it was read and ordered to lie on the table. Likewise, the Kentucky ratification was also returned to the House, while Maryland's earlier ratification isn't even listed as having been returned to Congress. So the House Journal implies that since Ohio and Kentucky were not required to notify the Secretary of State of their ratification decisions, there was likewise no requirement that Virginia file a certificate of ratification with the Secretary of State. Again, despite arguments to the contrary, it appears that the missing amendment was constitutionally ratified and should not be denied because of some possible procedural error. So you have to go to the archives. Each of Senator Mitchell's and Mr. Hargrove's arguments against ratification have been overcome or badly weakened. Still, some of the evidence supporting ratification is inferential. Some of the conclusions are only implied, but it's no wonder that there's such an austere sprinkling of hard evidence surrounding this 13th Amendment. And you know now that this amendment would never fly in current legislature if it was to start from scratch. You have to go back and see if it was ratified and prove that case. And it's waiting to be found. So we have an amendment in its original form that looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. But because we've been unable to find the eggshell from which it hatched in 1819, Senator Mitchell and Mr. Hargrove insist we can't quite absolutely prove it's a duck. And therefore the government is under no obligation to concede it's a duck. So maybe so. But if we can't prove it's a duck, they can't prove it's not. If the proof of ratification is not quite conclusive, the evidence against ratification is almost non-existent, largely a function of the government's refusal to acknowledge the proof. And we're left in a peculiar position of boys facing bullies in the schoolyard. We show them the proof that they should again include the missing 13th Amendment on the Constitution. They sneer and jeer and taunt us with cries of, "Make us." Perhaps they will. It's worth noting that Rick Donaldson, another researcher, uncovered certified copies of the 1865 and 1867 editions of the Colorado Civil Codes, which also contain the missing amendment. And although these editions were stored in the Colorado State Archive, their existence was previously uncatalogued and unknown to the Colorado archivists. That raises this fantastic possibility. If there's insufficient evidence that Virginia did ratify in 1819, there is no evidence that Virginia did not. Therefore, since there was no time limit specified when the amendment was proposed, and since the government clearly believed that only Virginia's vote remained to be counted in the ratification issue, the current state legislature of Virginia could theoretically vote to ratify the amendment, send the necessary certificates to Washington, and thereby add the amendment to the Constitution. Was it ratified, folks? There's a lot of evidence that it was. And there's a ton of publications that prove it from the early 1800s. So there you go. There it is. That's the argument. Are lawyers supposed to serve in office? According to the 13th Amendment, which was most probably ratified, they are not. What would that do to change the landscape of our Congress today? Good question. Then on that, we're done. We're out of time. We'll see you here after a 23-hour break tomorrow night with a whole new topic. Fresh ideas. Have a good night.